Someone who consistently gaslights won't take responsibility for their actions. They won't apologize. And sometimes they'll even do things to make you feel isolated and alone, like you are the only one in this world that feels that way. Hi everyone, welcome to the Lead from Love podcast. I am Yalini, I am your host and love coach. All right, so today's episode, it isn't just about sharing helpful advice. I want to use it to expose some dangerous behaviors that are so insidious that even smart and resilient women can be blindsided by them in a way where their whole worlds can fall apart. Now, I don't want this to happen to you, so I'm going to put myself out there like I always do. And I'm going to share an experience I had last year with gaslighting that made me question my identity and my worth. And so the story I'm going to share is to do specifically with the coaching industry, which, I know I'm also a coach and we aren't all the same, but it's not just specific to coaches. It's behavior that is more widespread and it can be really covert. So it can be hard to pick up sometimes. And I want to help you be aware of it, especially when it comes to dynamics in relationships or when you're seeking expert support, because especially when you're seeking specialist support, that's often when we give our power away and we can lose ourselves in the process. So in this episode, I'm going to share the difference between coaching and gaslighting because, even though they might sound like they are worlds apart, what might surprise you to know is that there's actually only a fine line between them. So I'm going to share what red flags to look out for and then how you can empower yourself with things like effective communication, setting boundaries, and knowing when it's time to walk away. This episode is not just a conversation. I really want to offer it as a lifeline for those of you who've maybe felt the confusion, the self-doubt, and the erosion of your confidence by being in situations of gaslighting, or to help prevent you from being in those circumstances or being able to get out of it quickly. So if you find this episode helpful, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, share it with friends, so we can create a community of women who feel supported and learn and where we can rise together. So let me jump straight into it and share what happened last year and what was my personal experience with gaslighting and with coaches. So last year, I really went all in for my business and I hired coaches to support me and really take it to the next level. Because prior to that, I worked at a hypnotherapy clinic, so I didn't have to do the business side of things. That was all taken care of. So my role was really just to show up and to serve my clients. And when it comes to my clients, I know that stuff. I know how to help them overcome deep-seated traumas and patterns of self-sabotage and overcome all of the anger and the rage and the pain so they can get to the other side where they feel free and they feel confident and they feel worthy of love within themselves before anyone else. So that I know how to do, but the business side of things, not so much. So I hired these coaches that, they talked a big game and how their strategies, it worked for everyone and it was the only way. And the moment you say it works for everyone, that's generally a little bit of a red flag because I don't believe that there's only one way and not everything is for everyone. I think there's so many different ways to heal. But regardless, they seem to, have support for a lot of the statements they made. And so I went, okay, I'll invest. I'm all in. And, I was using their strategies and doing all of the things and it wasn't quite working for me. But then I was part of their Facebook community and everywhere I looked, everyone seemed to be kicking goals. It seemed to be working for everyone. They seemed to be having all of this success, implementing all of these strategies. And I was just sitting there going, what's wrong with me? Why isn't it working for me? I'm trying to do all the things. Am I not showing up fully? Is there something that I'm doing wrong? Do I have subconscious blocks? Am I self-sabotaging in some way? Do I have limiting beliefs that are blocking me? So I questioned myself and I kept plugging away for months going, okay, this isn't working. I'm missing something. And I could feel it deep in my gut that there was something else that I was missing. And so I kept putting my hand up and saying, this isn't working. I need help. I need support. I feel like I am missing something. And for about a solid month of putting my hand up consistently, I kept getting the same response. I kept being told, oh no, it looks like you're doing everything right. These things just take time. Just keep going. Just keep going. It'll work. It'll work. Just keep doing it. And so I kept going and I just thought, no, there is something else missing. And so I kept insisting for someone to take me seriously and to take a deeper look until finally they did. And they came back with some suggestions. And, when I got that feedback initially, I was happy because I was like, okay, great. You're giving me something I can actually work with. But I remember feeling frustrated, and I shared that. I said, thank you for your advice and thank you for looking into this. I feel a little frustrated that it's taken this long to figure some of this stuff out. And the response I got was, oh no, that's just the normal process. When we problem solve, it normally takes some time. This is just normal. And rationally or logically, it makes some sense. But emotionally, something felt really wrong with that, because certain things shouldn't take that long. They should be part of an initial troubleshoot question. And some of these solutions highlighted an oversight on their part. And so it created a level of frustration within me because I thought, I've been putting my hand up for over a month. I've been doing this for months and it's taken you this long to figure some of these things out. And also, some of this was your responsibility. So the way I would liken that is to imagine if you went to the doctors because you were feeling really tired all of the time. And so they ran some tests, they did some blood work. Now, typically, one of the first things that you would check for is your iron, because your iron has so much to do with your energy levels. But imagine if that was missed as part of this blood test. And then they looked at everything and went, no, everything seems to be fine. So maybe you just need to get more sleep. Maybe you're just, pushing yourself too hard. You just need more rest. And you go, okay, but that doesn't feel quite right. I feel like there's more to it. Let me just go off and I'll do what the doctor says. And, you get more rest and maybe you even eat a little bit better, but you're still exhausted and you keep going back over and over and over again. They tell you you're fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. And then finally, they run another test and properly check your iron and go, oh, actually, you have low iron. I mean, on one hand, you're going to feel relieved that they figured it out and you have a solution and you've got something you can implement. But you might also feel a little bit annoyed because that's something that should have been picked up at the start, not after a month of you pushing, especially when it was some simple solutions. So that was the situation that I was in. There were some oversights, there were things that were missed that should have been picked up from the very start, instead of me feeling like I'm crazy, that there was something wrong with me. And so I ended up having another conversation with them. And initially I was really mad because I felt like I had legitimate concerns that weren't being taken seriously and that there was no acknowledgement or accountability, because here's the thing, I hired them to support me. And yes, I absolutely have a responsibility to show up and do the work and implement the strategies. But that accountability goes both ways. I also expect them to show up and do all of the things. Now, I'm not expecting perfection. We all make mistakes. So it's okay if there was an oversight. What I'm interested in is how you show up for that conversation, how you take responsibility and accountability for that. Because if someone is unwilling and unable to acknowledge their own actions, that is a problem for me. And so instead of just being annoyed and angry, I went, okay, well, I have to have a conversation. I have to be an adult and show up for this conversation so that we can clear the air. But before I could even show up for that conversation, I had to take responsibility for my emotions and process the anger so I could actually have a productive, meaningful discussion. And so I used the framework that I teach my clients because I have to do this too. And it doesn't mean that it's always easy, but it's about being really clear around the intent of what you're trying to achieve. And I just wanted to be heard. I wanted my feelings and my perspectives to be acknowledged and validated. And so, I do what I teach my clients, and you could not have had a better person show up to that conversation. And I was kind, I was loving, but I was also really clear in articulating my concerns. And at the end of that conversation, two really interesting things happened. One, they actually thanked me for the conversation and went, wow, I mean, if you're going to be this kind and say these nice things when you're giving me feedback, I will always show up to that conversation. But two, there was still no apology. There was still no acknowledgement and no accountability that had happened. And so I went, okay, I could not have handled that conversation better and been clearer with expressing what happened and my perspective. I then had a choice to make in terms of how I was going to move forward and what I wanted to do about that. I'm going to share what decision I made in a moment, but first I want to break down the difference between coaching and gaslighting so you can really see what happened here. So first of all, both coaching and gaslighting are about changing the way that you view your reality. So with coaching, the intent of that is to help you feel empowered and feel like you have choices in a circumstance, because often it's a situation where you feel like things have happened to you and, someone did something bad and you were the victim of a circumstance. And every time you feel like a victim, because you can't control someone else's behaviors, you feel powerless in that situation. You feel like you don't have choices. There's nothing you can do about it. So coaching is designed to help you feel like, okay, there are ways for you to take back control of your life so that you can feel empowered in that situation. But with gaslighting, normally what happens is it makes you question or change the way you view your reality in a way that makes you feel worse. So normally it's someone did do something bad and you have legitimate reasons to be upset. But that person, instead of validating your emotions, makes you start to question yourself and doubt yourself in a way where maybe you're wrong, maybe you're overreacting, maybe you're crazy, and you are the only one that feels this way. And so instead of feeling like, hey, my feelings are valid and something really wrong happened here, you start to feel confused. You start to doubt yourself and question your emotions and question your ability to trust yourself, and that erodes at your self-esteem. And if it happens over the long run, you can really lose yourself and lose any form of confidence, and it diminishes who you are in a way that really breaks you. And so this is the danger of gaslighting, and it can be really insidious, because good coaches, they should build trust. They should empower you. And you normally should see progress along the way in the way that you're moving forward in life and the confidence that you have and the ripple effect of positive changes that has throughout your life and in your relationships. But gaslighting, it's based on deceit in a way that destroys trust and makes you feel worse because you start to question who you are. Now, in saying that, because I know that gaslighting sounds terrible, here's the hard facts. It's not always intentional. And in fact, the thing that we might not all want to acknowledge is that most of us have probably done it in some way, shape or form at some point in our lives, by making remarks where someone shares how they feel and we say things like, don't be so silly, or don't be dramatic, you'll be fine. And it's not because we want to hurt them or make them feel dismissed, but it's generally because we're trying to make the problem feel small. And we think that we're helping by trying to tell them, don't be silly, you'll be fine. Like, don't worry about it. It's all good. Or don't be dramatic. But the truth is, our reality and the way that we experience life and our feelings, they're our own. And even if something feels like an overreaction, there is no such thing as an overreaction. Our feelings are always valid and there's always a reason behind them. And if you want to know more, check out episode 2. It's where I really go into the purpose of our emotions, what they mean, and why there is no such thing as an overreaction. For the purposes of this conversation, suffice it to say that our feelings are valid. And so sometimes we engage in certain types of gaslighting behavior unintentionally because that's our way of trying to help. We're trying to make the problem feel small. And other times it might be because when someone says that we did something bad, it's too hard for us to be able to accept that because we want to see ourselves as a good person that's well-meaning, that wants to help and is loving and supportive. And so to be told that we did something that was bad or that was at odds with who we see ourselves to be, it can be too much for us to be able to accept. And so we get defensive or we're in denial about it because we're not ready to accept the possibility of that. And that might not even be conscious. Our subconscious mind wants to protect us and wants to preserve our identity. And so it can be easy to dismiss something because we can't see that within ourselves. So I want to flag this because not all gaslighting is intentional. It doesn't mean that it makes it okay, but I just wanted to clarify it because I think when we talk about gaslighting behavior, it can be easy to think that people are inherently bad. And that's not always the case. Now, there are scenarios where gaslighting is absolutely intentional and it's narcissistic behavior where people want to control you and keep you trapped, and it's awful. That is another level of gaslighting. But the reason it's really important that it's not always intentional is because that shapes the way that you have these conversations. And I'm going to explore how to have the conversations in a minute. But first, I want to touch on the red flags and the warning signs and how you can tune in to know when something is wrong, because it can be really, really subtle in a way where someone will have what seems like a rational response to a situation of, oh no, these things, it's just the natural process. They take time. That's how problem solving works. And it doesn't feel right. So one of the red flags with gaslighting behavior is someone who consistently refuses to apologize or take responsibility for their actions. So in my scenario, I brought up this issue. I mean, I brought it up for a month, but then I brought it up twice specifically, sharing my frustration around how long these solutions had taken, especially when there were things that should have been brought up at the start. And both times, instead of an apology or an acknowledgement of their oversights, it was dismissed. There was absolutely no accountability that had happened. And in the process of that, what happens is, because at no point were my frustrations validated, that, yeah, of course I had every right to be frustrated that it's taken well over a month to figure out that there had been some oversights here. Similarly, if you go and you get a blood test done and they forgot to test your iron and it takes a month to figure that out, of course you're going to have some level of frustration, which is valid. So one of the red flags is a consistent lack of apology and lack of responsibility for their actions. The second one is where they invalidate your feelings. Instead of going, yeah, you have every right to feel that way, they rationalize it away as though that you're overreacting and your feelings aren't warranted here because there's nothing to be frustrated about. And the third thing that often happens with gaslighting is often there's a form of isolation that happens where it makes it feel like you are the only one to experience this problem. Everyone else is fine and you are the only person who is crazy. Now, one of the things that was happening in this particular community that I wasn't aware of at the time, but I discovered down the track, is that where I mentioned in their Facebook community, everyone just seemed to be kicking goals and doing well, and it was amazing. And so I felt like I was the only one. I was the only one that these strategies weren't working for. Instead of considering the possibility that maybe these strategies don't work for everyone, or maybe they don't work for me, or maybe they're not aligned with who I am in my business, I felt like, well, they keep saying it works for everyone and it looks like it works for everyone, so maybe I'm the problem. What I didn't realize was happening was that when people were posting complaints or bad experiences, those posts, those comments, they just mysteriously disappeared. And so being a part of that community was a distorted sense of reality because it made it feel like I was alone in this. And one of the reasons that people isolate you is so you don't realize that there's a community of support available to you. So that instead of being empowered and speaking up and standing up for your rights and finding your voice, everyone lives in silos, feeling alone and feeling small because you feel like there is something inherently wrong with you. And so when you see these red flags, one thing to really pay attention to is your gut feeling. It is your intuition, because it will tell you when something is wrong. So just like for me, I spent a month going, there's something more to this. there's something more to it. I could feel it in my gut. And so I trusted that. I've been doing this long enough, and I teach it to know that there is always a reason for that gut instinct. And so I kept speaking up. I kept asking for help. I kept pushing for someone to take me seriously. So pay attention to your intuition. Pay attention to any feelings of discomfort or doubt in your gut, because you know what? If something feels off, it's generally worth exploring further. And learn from hindsight, because you know what? Sometimes it can be difficult to pick these things up in the moment, because even though they sound obvious, they can be really, really subtle, and they become obvious only in hindsight when you reflect on it. So if you have been in these situations before and you can reflect on it, it gives you an insight of what other things to look out for. And also with your intuition, build a relationship with it. If you aren't used to trusting and following your gut instinct, then that's a relationship that you build. So start with small things and then build up. But your gut instinct, your intuition will always know when something is off. So when you tune into these things and you can pick up that this behavior is happening, what you can do is have effective communication. Now, again, like I said before, gaslighting isn't always intentional. So it's really important that you don't just start the conversation attacking someone and going, I can't believe you did this or you didn't do that. And, it's all gaslighting, because throwing that on someone can be really triggering, especially if they weren't aware that they were doing it. And generally a good person, if you talk to them about how you feel, they'll be mortified that they did something to hurt you, and they'll want to apologize and fix it and make things better. So it's important to give someone the opportunity to fix things before you go down the rabbit hole of attacking them. So for effective communication, it's important to share how you feel and not attack them by saying, you did this and you did that and you made me feel X, Y, and Z. It's, I feel sad, or I feel frustrated. I feel confused that it's taken this long. And then seek clarification around, what their experience was, or what their intent was, or what they were trying to achieve, what was going on for them. Because there's always two sides to a story. You don't always know what's going on for them. It's so easy to feel when we have been attacked or we have been dismissed or invalidated to feel like someone is just mean. But sometimes it was unintentional and they just didn't hear the things that we were saying. They were interpreting it a different way. So create the space to have meaningful conversations, because that might just clear things up and that might be enough. But they might not always respond the way that you want. So here's the thing. In communicating, it's really about expressing how you feel. Your job is not to convince someone that they did something wrong. Because the truth is, if someone doesn't want to face the facts that maybe they did something that was cruel or mean, they won't. They just won't. They don't want to acknowledge it. And you can talk to you are blue in the face and you're not going to get anywhere. So in approaching the conversation, be clear around what you want to achieve, whether it's to be heard and validated or if you want an apology. And then set some boundaries around what you'll do if those needs aren't met. So if they don't acknowledge what happened, if they aren't able to apologize, which is what happened in my case, be clear on how you want to move forward. So again, in my scenario, they weren't able to take any responsibility. They kept peddling the same line of, no, that's just the way these things go. It's just a normal process. And so in my case, they weren't able to take any accountability for their oversights and their part in that situation, which meant that not only were my feelings not validated and my frustrations acknowledged, which were valid frustrations to have, but I realized that I could talk until I was blue in the face. I was never going to be heard. And I could see that they had some level of empathy for my frustration, but still there was no accountability being taken. And so at that point, I had to acknowledge that I can't have meaningful relationships, even if it's professional relationships, with someone that cannot take accountability for their actions, because all relationships are a two-way street. And also, the way that they navigated that conversation was at odds with my own personal values, because accountability is so important for me, because I need to know that in any of my relationships, when something goes wrong, that we can have meaningful conversations. We can both take responsibility for our parts in that, hear one another, support one another, and move forward together. And when that doesn't happen, there's no future in that for me, because it means we can't work anything out ever. We're always going to have more problems. So it's important to know when to walk away, because again, it's not your responsibility to convince someone of their behavior. Your responsibility is to show up for the conversation, express to the best of your ability how you feel. And if they show you consistently that they're not able to meet you there, then that becomes a toxic relationship, because it only erodes at your own confidence. It makes you question yourself, make you feel like you're going crazy when you're not. And that becomes emotionally harmful. So sometimes you just need to know when to walk away. Walking away isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's about maintaining and preserving your sanity and your confidence and your worth. It's about making a stand around what you will and won't accept in your life. So for me, given the outcome of that conversation, mind you, there were 2 conversations that we had. In that second one, like I said, I used my framework. So if you cannot even be willing to acknowledge your role and your part in this with the way that I handled that conversation, in a way where you're even thanking me for it, then there is nothing left. And beyond that, their strategies, they weren't aligned with me and my business. And so peddling that, no, it absolutely works and there's no way that it won't work, wasn't going to cut it for me. Because again, that's not taking accountability that you're not for everyone. So I had to make the decision to walk away. And that's not always going to be an easy decision. So for me, I was tied up with contracts. I had all of these clauses that made it feel like I was going to be hit with all of these unbelievable fees. And I just had to choose myself over fear. I had to choose that come what may, I'm choosing my values and my principles, and I'm going to back myself, because I'm not going to stay in a toxic situation. And that ultimately is the only way to set yourself free, because otherwise it's choosing to stay in an abusive relationship or in an abusive environment that isn't good for your mental and emotional health. So at the end of the day, having clear boundaries and knowing when to walk away is really important. So I hope this story serves you, because if you have ever been, or if you ever experience a situation like this, whether it's coaching or relationships, whether that's professional or intimate relationships or friendships, I hope now you know what you can do, how to identify this behavior, and how to navigate your way through it so you can take care of yourself. Now, I know I went through quite a number of different things, so let me just recap them really quickly for you. Because the difference between coaching and gaslighting is that even though both of them get you to change the way you view your reality, coaching should empower you. It should make you feel better about yourself and like you're moving forward and upward in this life. Gaslighting, it just makes you question who you are. It makes you question your worth and your confidence and your abilities in a way that you stop trusting yourself. You feel like you're going crazy. And so even though that sounds bad, not all gaslighting is intentional. Sometimes we're doing it to help someone by diminishing how they feel to try and make the problem feel small. And so recognizing the red flags is really important. Someone who consistently gaslights won't take responsibility for their actions. They won't apologize. And sometimes they'll even do things to make you feel isolated and alone, like you are the only one in this world that feels that way. No one else thinks what you think. No one else thinks they're unreasonable. Everyone else thinks they're amazing, and you're the only one that has complaints. So there is something wrong with you. So to navigate your way through it, listen to your intuition, listen to your gut feelings, because if something feels wrong, then it likely is. And be willing to back yourself to speak up and to have those conversations. Now, it's not about the blame game. It's not about having to convince them that they did something wrong or that they're bad people. It's just about giving yourself the freedom to express how you feel. I feel sad. I feel frustrated. I feel confused. And give them the opportunity to acknowledge how you feel and see if they can show up to that conversation in a way that it can be healed and fixed. But if they can't, this is where you need to have those clear boundaries of what you'll do if they cannot take responsibility for their part in things. And sometimes that's really about knowing when to walk away, because someone who consistently cannot take responsibility, won't apologize, that becomes a toxic relationship that will only erode at your own sanity and your own confidence and your own self-worth. And when that happens, it makes it so much harder to walk away. But not just in those circumstances, you start to lose trust in yourself in other areas of your life. And you are too important to waste your time and your energy in spaces that take away from your sanity, that take away from your peace and your self-worth. So I hope you found this episode helpful. And if you know someone else that could also benefit from this, then please share it with them. Make sure that you leave a review or subscribe to the podcast, because it'll boost the algorithm so that more people can find this platform. Because together, let's empower one another. Let's embrace growth and find our way back to our hearts so we can lead from love.